Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Foreground Security webinar. Today, we're going to talk about social media security and social networking sites. I'm Mike Murray. I'm Foreground's Chief Information Security Officer and the head of our Offensive Services Unit, where we do pen testing and threat management and risk management and that sort of stuff. And today, I wanted to get a little bit deep into issues with social media and social networking sites, because it's a particular interest of mine. Anyone who knows me at all knows that I'm all over Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all of that sort of stuff. And it's amazing how we have seen the growth in those services really create a fertile environment for bad people to do bad things. It's one of the things that our clients talk to us about almost on a daily basis. I don't think that there certainly hasn't been a week that's gone by in mid-2009 that hasn't involved some client asking me about how to deal with this, whether it's an entity saying, oh, we're just done. We just block all access to all these sites all the time. I mean, there's been some high-profile news about defense organizations that have basically set block all policies for social media. And it's an interesting way to approach the problem, but unfortunately, I was talking to someone who was responsible for security a few days ago for a medium-sized company, and they made a really good point. It's nice to block all this stuff, but at the same time, the user is just going to go home and leak all this information from home anyway. So even if you think that you can just block all your traffic and be done with it, you still have risks, and you still have to deal with the issues that are posed by these social networking sites all the way around. So it's an important topic, and it's a topic we're going to go into more over the coming months. You're going to see a lot from us about this particular topic. I've already got probably 3 or 4 speaking engagements lined up on this particular topic, because it's one of those things that is going to be a big issue in security over the coming year. It really is going to be one of those sorts of issues that we're at the front end of this problem. We have just started to deal with all of the impacts of people getting to social networking. So today, I really want to just do an overview. This is not going to be a deep dive in how to deal with Twitter for the enterprise. This is more of a discussion of, all right, what is social networking? Why is it a big deal? Where did this big deal come from? I mean, a year ago, we weren't having this conversation. This is a brand new topic over the last 12 months. And specifically, what are the real threats out there? What are the vulnerabilities? And in general, what are the solutions? Because, the funny thing is there isn't an industry yet. The security industry always lags the actual problem set. So, when we first started the internet, and I'm not making myself out to be Al Gore, but back in the mid-90s when the web became big, and we went from the internet being a small academic research community to being a real corporate entity. You saw there being all of this need for companies to protect their newly burgeoning network presence, and the firewall industry, of course, lagged that, but eventually caught up and created that ability. And when web apps started to become a big problem about 5 years ago, it took. I mean, even now, I would say just now is really the web app firewall space becoming mature enough to actually be called a solution to the problem of web app security. It's at very least a useful control for web app security. So we're going to see the same sort of lag from industry. There's really not a good technical solution. There's not a good product that you can go out and buy today to solve your social networking threat. And frankly, this is actually one of the harder problems to solve, because social networks, and we'll get into this a little more later, social networks are designed to make it difficult to secure them just by their very nature. So it's actually a problem that industry hasn't solved yet. So if you're experiencing issues and if you're worried about the threat that social networks provide or pose to your organization or your environment, you're kind of SOL if you're looking to go buy a box. So it really comes down to, all right, what policy solutions do we put in place? What technologies can we leverage sort of on an off-label basis to help solve the problem? And then what can we do to protect the users, because they're one of the big threats that, I mean, really this is, they're called social networks for a reason. The threat is social, and I mean, everyone who knows me at all knows that I'm all about social engineering, and it's pretty much my major area of focus. So that being said, this threat is social, and there's an important component of making sure the users are involved in helping you solve the problem. So let's jump in and let's talk a little bit about social networking. I saw a really great definition of social media recently in a paper that is uncirculated currently. But this quote was that social media applications are applications that inherently connect people and information in spontaneous, interactive ways. Note that this is where this differs from the traditional website. A website has always been a very traditional broadcast model. The company comes out, puts a website out, and says, here's the information we want you to know. And then Google comes out and they index all the information that everybody wants you to know and push it to you. And blogs really started this whole thing with the idea of users coming together to create content that interacts with the content that companies are pushing at people in a way that mashes it up together and creates new combinations of that information, connecting it to the people. And so we got, from that, we got this next iteration of social applications where it becomes more a peer-to-peer model of information sharing. We think of Facebook and Twitter. The joke I always hear about Twitter is like, oh, who wants to go on this site where everybody tells you what they're having for breakfast all the time? That's not what Twitter's big usefulness is. Twitter is the ultimate information storehouse. If you go on Twitter, one of the things that I get most of my news from Twitter at this point, because there's no point in me really watching the news if I can just watch what my friends are talking about, because generally my friends are going to be interested in similar things that I'm interested in, and they're vice versa. They're interested in the things I'm interested in. So if I'm telling them what stories I'm reading and they're telling me what stories they're reading, we learn about the things that we're interested in an organic way. And so we have this information sharing that goes on that allows us to be very precise in meeting our own information gathering needs while at the same time working together to make sure that all of our information is better. So it becomes a discussion that is spontaneous and organic that allows us all to connect our information up together and effectively get the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of effect. So when I go to a social media application and I share some information and then someone comments back to me about that, and then a third person puts in their piece of information, we end up creating new information, creating new news about the news. It's almost a meta information opportunity. This is the business opportunity of social networks. I wrote an article in TechTarget recently from the career perspective on how to use Twitter. And one of the things I did in the article was to ask people on Twitter how Twitter had benefited their career. And then I used those quotes in the article. And one of the quotes that one of the people talked about was that they used Twitter to get access to information that they couldn't get any other way. For example, to ask if they're having, for example, a web application security problem, to ask the experts on web application security what their opinion is in real time. So, if I'm having a web app problem, I'll go on, ask Jeremiah Grossman what the problem is. Hopefully he answers. If he doesn't, hopefully someone who knows him, who